Good afternoon, everybody. I want to welcome Abbey Johnson. Abbey is the club's program director for the NDAA, which is the Notre Dame Alumni Association. She's a life support for all club presidents. Abbey provides support for the Notre Dame clubs in the following 6 regions: the East, the Mid-Atlantic, the Northeast, the Pacific Northwest, South, and West. And you might ask yourself, then what's left? Because I did. But in this capacity, she is responsible for new club leadership, onboarding, and ongoing customer service. She oversees the club's newsletters, club scholarship support, football ticket allocations, away game and athletic support, the annual report that all club presidents are responsible for to submit to the university, and awards process, and the Alumni Association Leadership Conference, which is coming up in about 3 weeks, April the 21st. So with that said, I'll turn it over to Pat and Abbey.
Abbey, thank you for your time and joining us today from South Bend. I wanted to ask you about this role that Mike was just talking about. I mean, onboarding club presidents and volunteer leaders who are really the ambassadors of the University of Notre Dame and the Alumni Association is no small task. You're taking people who have large organizations in the big cities, smaller organizations like ours. Some are alumni, some are not, so they have varied experience with the university. In our case, in the Gettysburg Club, we found Mike Miller just wandering the streets of Gettysburg and made him our president. He had never even heard of Notre Dame before, and yet you have turned him into an effective leader. So how do you do it? That's what we want to know.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me on and for all you both do, but the entire club, all you do for Notre Dame, and we'll get more into that. But I love my job, and I think everyone makes it easy and enjoyable because I do get to work with wonderful volunteers like Mike and yourself, who all have varying degrees of knowledge about Notre Dame and this wonderful club's network. But I think also what makes it so unique and special is everyone has some affinity for Notre Dame. So being able to learn about that affinity and that history and that connection is really enjoyable. And then being able to just encourage club leaders to do what they enjoy, to follow their passions, to inspire and lead other volunteers. That's really what I'm here for, and enjoy doing that and getting to meet people along the way and share the resources that we have available to try and make that job a little bit easier. I know the countless hours that people put into this role, and we see that and we hear that, and we're so grateful. But hopefully everyone enjoys it as well. And so we just try and make that experience as smooth as possible through the different resources we have. So the onboarding process, as was mentioned, is one area that I cover, and we've made some improvements along the way to really enable and encourage new club presidents to hit the ground running, whether their term is 1 year or 20 years. We're here supporting from the very beginning of that and along the way. So we've created a new club president guide that serves as a kind of a one-stop shop for club leaders, in addition to clubhub.nd.edu, which is our website for all things club related. There's a ton of information on there, so we just take a few minutes during the onboarding process to highlight that and make sure club leaders know to come back to that. And then one thing that we recently rolled out as part of that process, but really extends beyond the onboarding process as well, is the what we believe statement. And that really sets the tone, I think, from the very beginning of what we mean to be a Notre Dame club, and that's being open and welcoming and inclusive to all people, whether you're alumni or Subway alumni or friends, regardless of your gender, your race or ethnicity. we want everyone who has this affinity and love for Notre Dame to be involved in their local club in whatever capacity they want. And I think you all do a great job supporting that, given your number of Subway alumni or friends who are either club leaders or members of the club. So really grateful and appreciative of that opportunity. And I think that's one area where Notre Dame is just so different. I have the pleasure of getting to connect with other peer institutions and universities around the country and their alumni associations. And we're so unique in that we have people who did not attend Notre Dame, maybe even never been on campus, be leaders in the club, and the support that we show for this, I think, is unparalleled. So yeah, that's one part of my job, but one of the most enjoyable parts as well.
You know, I think that you can't put enough emphasis on what you just said about the amount of time and energy that club leaders really put into the effort, and they do it really from a sincere love for Notre Dame and what it represents, that what we believe statement. You know, I grew up in the Harrisburg area where it seemed like Barry Ryan was not the club president, but the club king for all time. And in Gettysburg, it's a little bit different. There's, you know, I get emails at all hours of the day and night from either Mike as president or Jim Conrad, the communications person. Jack Kale is chipping in with a very sharp financial mind. There's just any number of volunteers out taking care of this service effort or that service effort. But it all has to come together. And what I'm hearing is these, you know, this ability now with the website and the improvements to Club Hub and so forth, to just bring everybody together to say, well, whatever you're doing, there is a core set of values. You know, so as soon as I joined Notre Dame Club of Gettysburg, they were very big on the 6 C's, and I imagine we have more than that now. But all right, you know, how much does that play into, you know, we want to hit all of these categories in your programming and making sure that people understand that and really make it a priority?
Yeah, so we still only have 6 C's.
Good to know.
Yeah, we can't memorize more than that at this point, so we'll stick with 6. But we do have a new 6 C. So in 2020, 2021, we introduced Career Connections. As our newest 6C, we eliminated communications because that's really inherent in anything a club does, right? All the programming you do, you kind of have to communicate about it. So we saw that communications shift to more of an operational expectation, and really that programming still focus on the 6 C's with Career Connections, Catholic Christian Spirituality, current students, community service, camaraderie, and what's continuing education. So there's always one that takes a minute. But we really see and we heard from alumni, parents, and friends and students, you know, what they want and need from their local club. And all of that kind of fit into these 6 C's that I think are really representative of Notre Dame as well, right? You have the faith, you have the learning, you have the students, and you have that spirit. So all of those are really tied together. And I over the past few years, really seen this need an area around career and what am I doing professionally, and how does Notre Dame go from that 4 years to 40 years, as we like to say. So I like to say that we have those 6 C's that are really guiding principles or pillars of programming, but ultimately each club should do that programming that speaks to their local community, right? So I know Gettysburg does a ton of community service, and there are things that are needed in your community. So it's not necessarily, you know, what's going on here in South Bend. You guys may have a different need or area of most important need in your community, and that's where we want you to focus your efforts, if that's what appeals to you and your members. Every community is a little bit different, but it's bringing that Notre Dame spirit, that Notre Dame help and structure to address those needs in your immediate community. So they're really guiding principles that I think we've seen with big success in the club network. And we just try and provide those resources and guidance around what this could look like, while allowing that flexibility for whatever's going on in your community, what's of interest to your volunteers and your members. And I think that's what's really special about the network as well, is how each of those 6 C's comes to life, and getting to read about those and share those across the network as well.
So in that role and understanding that each club is responding to a unique community, you sort of have your finger on the pulse of what the ideas that are flowing out there. And I'm sure there are days at work where you're really impressed, where somebody's come up with something that you haven't seen before. Can you give us a flavor for, especially clubs like ours that are smaller, maybe in not in big cities, what people have been up to, the kinds of ideas that Notre Dame is giving a thumbs up to and saying, yes, that's the kind of thing that we're talking about that we want you to be doing, or that we will give support to do?
Yeah, great question. I think we've seen so much, especially these past few years during the pandemic. It's led to national initiatives that we've done, like Meals with Muffet or Hope for the Holidays or Fighting Irish, Fighting COVID. We've seen such inspirational stories from communities and clubs of all sizes. We said, yeah, there's not necessarily one thing that has to be done, but let's highlight and support all the things that are being done. And so that's what's led to some of these national service initiatives that we're certainly moving forward, where we've just launched Spring into Service and May for Our Mother. So more of those kind of national initiatives where we just want to continue to support the wonderful things that clubs are already doing or thinking about doing, and providing those resources from social media graphics, email template languages, spotlighting on social media, things like that, to just encourage and promote those events as well, and opportunities to help the network. I think one thing that I've heard are individual people, right, volunteer or donate their time and talent to different organizations, and just bringing that forward to the club and saying, hey, here's a need at this nonprofit that I work with, or I make sandwiches and drop the sandwiches off at this homeless shelter. Does anyone else want to make sandwiches one day a week? And just making those little, and I say little because it seems little, right? Oh, I'm just making this ask to make sandwiches. But the impact that has on the people who get to eat those sandwiches and don't go hungry that day is profound. And I think that's the wonderful thing about this network, is as individuals, we can bring these ideas up to the club and have a greater impact just because of the number of people who might get involved. So I always encourage clubs to ask what organizations their members volunteer at, or what organizations are in the area that maybe need more support this season or this month. Or are there ways that the club can highlight different nonprofits? Maybe there's not necessarily that giving of time as a club, but bringing attention and awareness to the nonprofit or the cause, I think goes a long way, because you never know what may resonate with one of your members. So I think especially during the pandemic and when in-person opportunities weren't necessarily feasible, just bringing that awareness and attention to is something a club of any size can do. But again, just tapping into your local networks and nonprofits. I know Gettysburg, I'm going to forget the name of the Hispanic organization you work with, but identifying those specific organizations and being able to amplify the impact they have because of the number and spirit, that Notre Dame spirit, goes a long way.
I think your emphasis on even raising awareness as an act of service is a good one, because, you know, I thought in anticipation of this conversation about COVID and with club programs, has that been a hindrance? Has it been just an opportunity to find new ways to excel and to create connections? And, I'm hearing, especially with social media and so forth, that awareness is certainly something you can do without getting together. I think throughout, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, we were terribly worried about shutting down our outreach to nursing homes, which has been a longstanding tradition with the club. And of course, that did have to come to a halt. Certain fundraising like bingo activities, which is a longstanding tradition that is we do in conjunction with another organization, that had to come to a halt. So then we worried, well, what can we do then if we're not doing those things? But I think that's a great point, that simply raising awareness and making connections another way is really where you have to turn and pivot to in a time like this.
Yeah. And I think too, realizing you can still have that impact. It may just look and feel a little different because you're not necessarily having that hands-on experience, but knowing that you made a difference in letting someone else know, or donating maybe some of your time online or virtually online, connecting or, reposting something, it still goes a long way. And it may just feel different, but with some of these national initiatives, what are things that you can do at your own home, maybe with your family? It doesn't necessarily have to be with a ton of people, but it still goes a long way if you think of the people who are receiving that service or receiving that donation of your time or talent or treasure.
Right. And turning sort of more broadly to what you said, or what Mike said at the outset, and then what you said, that the onboarding and leadership training and directing programs and activities is sort of one part of what you do. Looking at a day in the life of Abbey Johnson, there's a whole range of other responsibilities that come up on your desk every single day. I'm not sure I would want the responsibility for football ticket allocations, but hey, more power to you. But talk to me about some of the other responsibilities that come up with a large swath of the country, and you being the sort of liaison to those clubs. What comes up? What occupies your day?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it definitely ranges. I get to talk with wonderful volunteers like Mike as just questions come up. And usually they're around my Notre Dame help, website questions, email questions. It kind of depends on the season as well. So right now, Mike mentioned we're getting ready for leadership conference. So putting the final touches on that agenda, making sure our logistics are ready, and very excited to welcome around 300 volunteer leaders back to campus for the first time in 2 years. So a lot of that going on, as well as preparations for Notre Dame Day. That usually takes place in late April, which is a great opportunity for clubs to raise money for scholarship funds to support future and current Notre Dame students. So usually just some programming questions, onboarding new club leaders, my Notre Dame website assistance, and then always connecting with my team. We have such a strong clubs team. I could not successfully be in this role without them. Right now, Kieran Mystery and Leah Barthley, who works with our international clubs, but also oversees Hesburgh Lecture Series. So this is a time when clubs are starting to host more in-person events. And so, helping with communications, reaching out to speakers, and then looking ahead to fall. So while we're in a season, we're always looking ahead and strategically planning and getting ready for the next season. So football tickets and planning with away games. There'll be a game in Maryland, so within your region in 2022. So, and then working with the regional directors is also a part of my job. So I had a call with the regional director earlier today. So they serve on our board of directors, but then also work very closely with the clubs. And so I touch base with them at least monthly, if not more often, to check and see what's going on with the clubs in their region, get ready for whatever's coming up next, check in on goals, things like that. So it's hard to say what a typical day is. And especially this time, it's odd, but we're getting ready for the next fiscal year as well. So what have we achieved this past fiscal year? It's not done yet, but what have we achieved, and strategically, what are we looking to do moving forward, which is a part of the job I really enjoy. So what have we learned? What have we heard from club leaders that we should continue to do or should amplify even more? And then bringing that forward to our leadership team as an area that we want to focus on in the next year.
Fantastic. And with so much responsibility, I think that the next natural question is, how did you get to this role? And I know you have a master's degree in nonprofit administration from Notre Dame. I know at some point you were a leader yourself in a rather significantly sized club, and then you found your way to South Bend. But tell us about your Notre Dame journey.
Yeah. So I grew up about 3 hours west of Notre Dame in a northwest suburb of Chicago. So I'd always known about Notre Dame and gone to Catholic school, kindergarten through high school. So Notre Dame was always somewhere that I really liked, and we visited for a couple of games and such. But then I had to get out of the Midwest for my college experience. So I ended up in North Carolina and started working in the nonprofit field, which is what drew me then when I was ready to kind of continue my education. I was looking for a nonprofit master program, and Notre Dame stuck out to me because it was the only school or the only program I could find that offered the master program within the College of Business. So that to me was really important and really unique. And the program also allowed me to continue working full-time while completing my master's. So it just marked every single box that I was looking for. And also was Notre Dame. So it had that special calling. And so I started that program, and as soon as I got accepted, I joined the Notre Dame Club of New York City, which is where I was living at the time, as a way to just kind of meet people and also know what I was getting into, find out, the places I had to go on campus or off campus. And so that was really great. So I got involved right away, and I think the second monthly meeting I went to, they said, okay, we're looking for a secretary. And I said, sure, why not? And who knew what I was getting into, but I was just so eager, and everyone was so welcoming and energetic. The first few meetings I went to, that I just knew it was something I wanted to be a part of, and contribute to as much as possible. So I became the secretary of the club, and then soon after became the vice president as well. So it was a great experience to really learn what the Notre Dame Club was. I had no idea about this network when I joined. And then as I completed my program, I got to meet people who were already working on campus or lived in the area, and worked at some local organizations. So it was great just to get to meet people. And then I stayed active with the club. And then as I was thinking through, kind of what's next, the club's program manager role opened up, and I had met with Ellie Coons, who was on the team when I started and hired me, and Angeline Johnson, who was previously on the team and now works with the affinity groups. I had met them when I was on campus just to talk about the club network and, see what we could be doing in New York. And so when this job opened up, I reached out to Ellie to get some more information, and it just felt like the right time. Most of my family's still in Illinois, so closer to them, and just learned so much because being in New York, and you guys may relate with being involved with the Gettysburg Club, is your club inside and out, that sometimes you just don't know what else is going on with the other clubs. And so as I actually attended the leadership conference as a volunteer leader, so that's when I really got to know more about some of the other clubs and hear what they were doing. So then when I took on the role of clubs program manager, it was really nice to already have some of those connections, so I could reach out to people I had met when I was attending the conference and bring some bring some of that forward into the role. So it's been great getting to see what other clubs do. And I will never say I have a favorite club, but I have a lot of special ones close to me.
That's not what you said right before we started recording.
That's what I waited till I purposely waited until we weren't recording for that.
Yeah, just kidding, other clubs watching this. She never said that Gettysburg was her favorite club. Well, Abby, you are such a wonderful resource, and I don't think Mike is exaggerating when he says that you are sort of the life support for a lot of these clubs, because we do get down in the weeds of how our own club is operating, and maybe need to look up every once in a while to say, hey, what does NDAA want us to be doing here? What is another club doing that might be a good idea? And you are a fantastic resource for that, and we thank you for that. So I appreciate your time, and I'll turn it back over to Mike for some closing comments.
Well, I think anybody that watches this episode will recognize the ambition, the life that Abby brings to all the clubs within the NDAA, and she really is full of, help and vigor, and I don't know that anybody can say anything bad about her. Let's say that.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate that.
No,
and
it's true.
having me on today.
All right. Well, thank you, Abby, for your time. And of course, go Irish.
Go Irish.
Yes, go Irish. Thanks all.